The internet. It's another evening of History and a Drink. I'm Shawn.
And I'm Frank. And tonight we're going to be talking about three famous women pirates, two that were in the Caribbean and one that haunted the Irish Sea.
Excellent. So female pirates, and now part of this season, what we're doing, what's bringing us to that study, that lesson for tonight, we are actually traveling around from Sarasota. You and I are making some day trips and going to check out local rum distilleries that are around us. And we went and viewed one last week.
Yeah, so we went up to Lakewood Ranch, and there's a distillery called Loaded Cannon Distillery. And so they have a whole bunch of different types of rums, vodkas,
whiskeys, yes.
Tons and tons of things, lots of flavors and all of that kind of stuff. They have a really cool little tasting room up front. But our lesson comes from their stills. So they named their stills after famous women pirates. So one is named Mary and one is named Annie. And so we're going to be talking tonight about Mary Read and Anne Bonny. And then our other one is going to be Grace O'Malley.
Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate queen.
Yep.
Okay.
Related?
So, what?
Are you related?
Not related, I don't think so, but could be back in the way. All the Irish are related.
I know.
All right, let's talk about Mary Read.
All right, so Mary Read, it kind of, I think, is the central part of the story here.
Mm-hmm.
She was born around 1685, and the story of her birth was her father was a sailor and married her mother, and they had a child, a son, right? Then she had an extramarital affair while he's out on
sailors
at sea.
out to sea, months and months, years at a time out to sea.
And so she got pregnant from that affair and had a child that she named Mary.
It was a girl, okay?
Now, she was getting an allowance from her mother-in-law to live on, right? So she went and visited friends while she was pregnant and hid out and all of that. And while that happened, the son died. And so to keep getting that allowance from his mother-in-law or her mother-in-law, she started dressing Mary as a boy, and she'd go in by the name Mark Read. So
the brother. Yeah.
Exactly. So they lived off of that for many years. But she also started working at a very young age as well. But her first job was working as a footboy. So they work on the carriages, they put the little step down and all that kind of stuff. So she did that. She got bored with that, so she joined the military at age 13. And she got put on board a British man of war.
And still as a boy.
As a boy.
Yeah.
Right? So she didn't like that job either, so she quit that, and she moved to Flanders, which is in modern-day Belgium. And she joined a regiment of the foot and took up arms with the other soldiers there that were fighting. And she fought so bravely and stuff that she actually earned herself a commission. Now, commissions back then could be bought and sold. And so what she did is she sold her commission so that she could move on and become a person in a horse regiment instead of a regiment of foot.
So now she's on a horse, okay?
Yeah.
But still considered a young man.
Yes, still considered a young man. Now, while this is all going on, she falls in love with a Flemish soldier. So it would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall when the conversation comes up. Well, I'm really a woman.
Yeah.
So they get married.
Mm-hmm.
She quits. They both quit being in the military. They used the money from the commissions that they had earned. They sold them, and they bought an inn called the Three Horseshoes.
Okay.
And it was
so she put aside the military life and become an innkeeper.
Yeah, which unfortunately her husband dies a few years later, and she's not cut out to be an innkeeper.
Her military background is pulling her back.
Yeah, exactly. Or I think it's more the adventure.
Okay.
I think she had this great sense of adventure. So she tries to join back up with the military, but there's no wars going on, so there's no need for more soldiers.
So who can she fight?
Well, what she decides to do is I'm just going to get on to a ship and go to the West Indies and see what happens. And while en route, They get boarded by a pirate, and they get captured. And she willingly joins the pirates to go and start her days as pirating. Yep. Now, they will ultimately negotiate a pardon from the crown so that they can become privateers.
Okay.
And that happens around 17, 18, 19. But that's really short-lived because they can't stand their captain, and they mutiny and become pirates again.
And go back to pirates again, all right?
In that short period of time that they're on their own, they meet up with Calico Jack Rackham, who's a famous pirate from that time. And he is sailing around with a person that we know as Anne Bonny, but she's going by Andy Bonny.
Also dressed as a man, because pirates are not really respecting women as
exactly.
ships.
And so early on, both of them believed that each other was a man.
Okay.
Right? So then this weird love triangle happens where
only pirates.
Bonnie falls in love with Mary, and
vice versa, thinking each other.
Right. Yeah. So then Anne tells Mary that she's a woman, and Mary's like, so am I. So then both of them.
And meanwhile, Calico Jack goes, yay!
Probably.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we see that he gets told, and supposedly they're the only ones who know that they're women on board ship. The ship that they were on was called the William, and it was small. It only had 14 crew members. I can't believe that you wouldn't know by that, but we weren't there. Who knows? Exactly. So they are pirating for a number of years, and there are a bunch of pirate hunters in the Caribbean. And one of them is named Jonathan Barnett, and he finds out that the William and her crew is going to be at a certain point off of Jamaica, Negro Point, and that they are going to be partying up with a couple other crews.
They got a bunch of rum. They're partying up at anchor in port, and he decided that was where he could capture them.
Exactly. So he goes and he attacks them. Well, the pirates are all drunk, and the story goes that they run away.
Jump in the water, swim off.
Down into the hold of the ship.
Yeah.
And Mary and Anne are the only two that are trying to fight them off. And actually, at one point, the story goes that Anne took her pistol and shot down into the hold, killed one of the crew, and wounded another one because they were being
cowards.
Exactly. Yeah. So Barnett's men overwhelm them and take control. And so they are taken to the capital of Jamaica, and they are put on trial. They are sentenced to hang for acts of piracy. And so that's when Anne and Mary play the pregnant card. And they then pleaded that they were quick with child, and the term of the time they were pleading the belly.
Pleading the belly, okay? So you can't kill us because we're pregnant.
Exactly. So their execution got stayed. Now Mary's going to catch some kind of fever. They didn't really know, but they said it was a violent fever, and she dies in 1721 in prison. Yeah. So, and there's records of her being buried in St. Catherine's Church in Jamaica, but there's no record whether she was born or buried with a child or not. So we don't know if she had the child or she died while she was pregnant,
or if she faked the whole thing.
Right. Exactly. All right. So that's where we got a definite conclusion for
Mary.
Right now, Anne, on the other hand.
Well, what's her background? What was her?
Okay, so Anne was from Ireland.
Okay.
All right, and her mom was a servant in a house, and the mom got really sick and went to other family to live, and the husband stayed there because that's where his business was, and to raise the other children that they had, and had an affair with the maid, and Anne was born.
Okay.
His job is being a lawyer. His last name was Cormac, and he decides that he's going to go to London to try and make more money and stuff. Sure. Now, the wife was more wealthy than he was and was actually giving him an allowance. So he took Anne, and her mother's name is Mary too, so it can get kind of confusion. Took both of them to London, but he started dressing Anne as a boy and calling him Andy, and was going to get him a job clerking for other lawyers.
So hence I see a theme here for
Exactly.
for later in life. Yep.
So once the real wife found out, she was pissed and said, cut off all their money.
Allowance, yep.
And so they had nothing there, so they decided to get on board a ship and go to the Carolinas.
Okay.
All right. Now, he was quite successful there. He tried being a lawyer, but they really didn't need that there. And so he owned a plantation and was a businessman and all of that. Now, Bonnie was considered a good catch. She had this fiery red hair with the temper to go along with it, too. And the story goes that supposedly she got so mad at one of their servants that she stabbed them when she was about 12 or 13.
So piracy was right up her alley. So,
exactly. Yeah. So she went on to marry a poor sailor, and he was like a wannabe pirate named James Bonny. So that's where we get her name, Anne Bonny. Now, James Bonny married her because he wanted to get a hold of Cormac's estate.
So he's trying to marry up a little bit.
Right, exactly. And so once Cormac found out about this, he's like, this ain't happening. And he disowns Mary or Anne.
Yep.
And so she
is on her own with Bonnie.
Right. And supposedly there's another story that she got so mad at that she burned down the plantation. So
stab a girl, burn down your home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. She's redhead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, and her husband, he's all about making money. So he gets somehow caught up and becomes an informant for the crown. And lots of pirates that they hang around with start getting caught in all of this stuff. And Anne is pissed about this.
And much like the day now, snitches get stitches.
Exactly. So she starts going and doing her own thing, and she's hanging out in the taverns with the sailors and the pirates and stuff, and she comes to know Calico Jack. And so the two of them become lovers, and he tries to pay James off to divorce her so he can marry her. Yeah. She refuses to do that, so the two of them run off. They're going to steal a ship together. They get a whole new crew, and the captain of that ship is then going to divorce them.
Because the captain can do that. He can marry people and divorce people.
And then marry him.
But Calico was the captain.
Exactly.
So he's all right.
So that's
performing his own marriage.
Right. Now, so she on board ship was always dressed as a man. She ends up getting pregnant. All right. So I don't know how the rest of the crew could not know, but so
drinking lots of rum, maybe. I don't know.
They drop her off in Cuba where she gives birth to a son, and that's the last I read about him. There's nothing really.
He kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's after this that they capture the ship that marries him.
So now we connect with another story. We see how they're all the triangle together.
Exactly.
Now, so Annie died in prison.
No,
Mary died in prison. So what happened to Anne Bonny?
So Anne Bonny, we really don't know. So there are two different contradicting accounts. So in that area where the prison was, there is a ledger with a burial of an Anne Bonny in 1733.
Yeah.
All right. But there's another story that she left Jamaica, went back to the Carolinas, and lived there until she died in 1782. So there's a big discrepancy there, 50 years of what really happened. So we don't really know what happened to her. Calico Jack is executed. Yep. So,
and the end of our pirate love triangle.
Right. That brings us to Grace O'Malley.
Yes.
So this is a much earlier story. This is in the 1500s. So she's born in 1530 around there and dies in 1603. And she was called the Pirate Queen of Ireland. Now, what was interesting is her family, she came from a noble family of the Irish descent, and they made their money through shipping and seafaring.
The O'Malley family crest is honored by land and sea. So,
So she grew up sailing and really started her own seafaring when she was age 11. So, and then because of that, when she came into her own, she was able to then defend Ireland against the Irish, because it's Or the British, because the British are invading Ireland at this time and subjugating it and making it really their first colony.
Yeah.
So she's born and raised in a castle, and she actually accrues 4 more castles, either through conquest or marriage, in the rest of her life. But the story that I found the most interesting is she actually goes and meets Queen Elizabeth, and in 1593. So this is towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, and Grace went there with the idea of 2 of her sons had been captured and put into prison. She wanted them out, and so she's going to make deals with the queen.
Plea bargain.
Yep. And what was interesting is there must have been some kind of mutual respect or something between these 2 great women, because Queen Elizabeth gave her everything that she wanted, and all she had to do was promise to not be part of the rebellion anymore.
Yeah.
And so both of her children were released. She got to go back to her castles and do all of that stuff.
And retired from piracy.
Yeah. Now, we don't know a lot what happens after that. We don't have really a lot of her fighting either, because most of the history written in Ireland this time is written by Catholic monks who are men, and she's a woman. And so they kind of write her out of history.
Yeah.
So we only hear the stories that were passed down really through oral tradition and stuff like that to understand her life and everything. Yeah. But we do know that she was married twice. With her first marriage, she had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And she was then married again. Her husband dies, and she marries again and has a son with that husband. So had 4 children. They go on to be viscounts and have noble titles and all of that kind of stuff because of the family lines they were in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's our stories for tonight. For you guys who are local here in Sarasota, I really urge you, if you get a chance, go. It's actually in between State Road 70 and State Road 64 on Lakewood Ranch Boulevard. Yeah. Not too far away is the Loaded Cannon Distillery. And once again, when they tell you that their different stills are named after women, now you know where those names came from.
Exactly.
So excellent. So we are going to do a couple travels for next week.
Yep.
And we're going to go take a look at a couple more distilleries, and so we'll have some good stories for you next Monday as well. Yeah, so a little bit of surprise. We'll put it on there. But thank you guys for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. For those of you who are not here, we follow up with this with a couple rounds of trivia and have a good old time. And we'll keep on rolling. Thank you guys so much. See you next week.